Alright, let's get real for a second. We live in a world where you can convince half the internet that birds aren't real, where people fall for fake celebrity death hoaxes every other week, and where somehow pineapple on pizza still sparks international debates. The ability to think critically has never been more important. Yet here we are, watching people confidently share articles from totallylegitnews.com like it's gospel. Critical thinking isn't about winning arguments or avoiding scam emails from a Nigerian prince who mysteriously needs your bank details. It's about navigating life with a fully functioning brain, making decisions that don't come back to haunt you, and most importantly, not embarrassing yourself in public debates. Let's talk about why critical thinking is the MVP of human existence and what happens when people decide to just wing it instead. Imagine you're trying to assemble furniture without instructions. You could just wing it and hope for the best. Or you could step back, analyze the parts and figure out the most logical way to put it together. Critical thinking is like having an internal instruction manual for life. It helps you piece things together in a way that actually makes sense, instead of hoping everything works out through sheer luck. One of the biggest perks of critical thinking is problem-solving efficiency. People who don't engage in deep thinking often go through life putting out metaphorical and sometimes literal fires that they probably could have avoided in the first place. Think about the last time you saw someone panic over a relatively simple problem, like the guy who calls a plumber because his faucet is leaking, only to realize he never actually turned the handle all the way off. Critical thinkers look at situations from different angles, explore possible solutions, and work smarter rather than harder. Instead of making 10 failed attempts before arriving at the right answer, they carefully analyze the situation first, cutting down on unnecessary trial and error. Then there's resilience against misinformation, which might be the most important skill to have in today's digital age. If you've ever watched someone confidently share a fake news article about how drinking pickle juice will cure all diseases, you've seen firsthand what happens when people don't think critically. The internet is a glorious but dangerous place where misinformation spreads faster than common sense, and without critical thinking, people become easy targets for manipulation. A critical thinker doesn't just accept something as fact because it's trending. They question sources, verify credibility, and recognize when something seems too good or too ridiculous to be true. Another area where critical thinking shines is informed decision-making. Let's say you're trying to choose a new laptop. The non-critical thinker buys the first one they see on sale without checking reviews or specs, only to realize later that it doesn't have enough storage or the right ports. The critical thinker, on the other hand, researches different models, weighs pros and cons, and makes an informed choice that won't leave them frustrated 6 months down the road. This applies to everything from financial investments to career moves to deciding whether or not you should trust that random guy offering guaranteed lottery-winning strategies. On a personal level, critical thinking also plays a huge role in continuous personal growth. People who never question their own beliefs or challenge their own ideas remain stagnant, living in an intellectual bubble of their own creation. Critical thinkers, however, are constantly learning, evolving, and refining their perspectives. They don't just stick to their opinions because they're comfortable. They explore new viewpoints, embrace new information, and recognize when it's time to update their understanding of the world. If you've ever had a conversation with someone who refuses to change their mind despite overwhelming evidence, you know how exhausting it is to deal with someone who lacks this skill. And let's not forget the job market of the future. AI is automating everything: data entry, customer service, and even some aspects of legal work. If your job consists of following basic steps with little variation, there's a good chance a machine will eventually take over. But you know what AI can't do? Think critically and make ethical decisions based on human experience. Employers are looking for people who can analyze, adapt, and approach situations with a strategic mindset. Critical thinkers will always have an edge because their skills go beyond simply following instructions. They understand why things work the way they do and how to adjust when things don't go as planned. And on a practical, everyday level, critical thinking simply keeps life from becoming a complete mess. It helps you figure out why your phone isn't charging before assuming it's broken, recognize when a deal is actually a scam, and avoid falling for ridiculously obvious marketing tricks. It's the mental muscle that separates rational decision-making from blind guesswork, and the more you use it, the sharper it gets. Now, let's look at the flip side of the coin. What happens when people don't think critically? First up, ethical blindness. This is when people do questionable things simply because it's the rule, or that's how it's always been done. If history has taught us anything, it's that blindly following orders is a recipe for disaster. Ethical blindness is what allows people to ignore glaring issues, support harmful policies, and justify bad behavior because they never take the time to step back and ask, wait, is this actually the right thing to do? Critical thinking isn't just about logic, it's also about moral reasoning. Without it, people can become passive enablers of unethical behavior without even realizing it. Then we have difficulty adapting to change. The world is constantly evolving, from technology to social norms to workplace expectations. People who lack critical thinking skills tend to resist change rather than adapt to it. They get stuck in their ways, clinging to outdated ideas and refusing to evolve with the times. We all know that one person who still complains about smartphones while using one daily. Without the ability to analyze and adjust to new situations, life becomes a never-ending battle against progress. And let's be real, that's an exhausting way to live. Another major consequence is increased emotional decision-making. Now, emotions are great, they make us human, but making decisions solely based on emotions is like letting a raccoon drive a car. It's chaotic, unpredictable, and almost always ends in disaster. People who don't think critically often let anger, fear, or excitement dictate their choices without stopping to analyze the bigger picture. That's how people end up quitting jobs in a rage, buying things they don't need, or getting into avoidable arguments over things that don't actually matter. A little bit of logic goes a long way in preventing unnecessary stress and regret. And let's talk about poor conflict resolution skills. If you've ever been in an argument with someone who refuses to listen to reason, you know exactly what this looks like. Instead of analyzing the situation and considering different viewpoints, non-critical thinkers double down, raise their voices, and treat every disagreement like a battle to the death. They lack the ability to compromise, recognize nuance, or admit when they're wrong, which makes resolving issues nearly impossible. Meanwhile, critical thinkers approach conflicts with a level-headed perspective, focusing on facts rather than emotions, and actually listening to the other side. But the worst consequence, the overall decline of society's progress. When critical thinking declines on a large scale, bad ideas thrive, misinformation spreads unchecked, and people start making collective decisions based on fear and ignorance rather than reason and evidence. Societies that lack critical thinking stagnate because innovation slows down, policies become more reactionary than rational, and people become more susceptible to manipulation by those in power. History's full of moments where bad leadership flourished simply because people failed to question, challenge, and analyze what was happening around them. Without critical thinkers, societies become easier to control, easier to deceive, and much harder to move forward. And then there's just the sheer embarrassment factor. Nobody wants to be the person who falls for an obvious scam, believes in a debunked conspiracy theory, or confidently spreads false information in a group chat. Without critical thinking, people become walking cautionary tales, making life choices that leave the rest of us scratching our heads. At the end of the day, critical thinking is the difference between making smart, well-reasoned choices and being the person who still thinks the earth is flat. It allows us to solve problems efficiently, resist misinformation, make informed decisions, grow as individuals, and secure our place in the future job market. Without it, we're left with a world full of emotional decision-making, stubborn refusal to adapt, and people who still haven't figured out that not everything on the internet is real. The only way forward is to question everything, challenge our own beliefs, and most importantly, never let an algorithm do our thinking for us. So, next time someone tries to convince you of something outrageous, take a step back, think critically, and ask yourself, does this actually make sense? Or am I about to embarrass myself in a very public way? Your future self will thank you.